Welcome to cebsar Talk. I am Evans Apia Kisi, the host of cebsar Talk. cebsar is Center for Better Society Advocacy and Research Africa. cebsar Africa is a non-profit organization that believes in a better society for all. We in cebsar Africa believe that a better society begins with you and I. Hashtag, a better society begins with me. For more information, please log on to www.cebsarafrica.org. Please follow us on the various social media platforms: YouTube, cebsar Talk, Facebook at cebsar Africa, Instagram, cebsar Africa, and Twitter at cebsar Africa. Like always, today we bring you another interesting discussion on our series of interrogating the manifestos, power and energy. And to help us discuss this important discussion, which I would introduce after reading the synopsis. As we know, political election manifestos are public declarations of policies and aims of political parties wanting to rule a nation. Given that a manifesto is a social contract that plays a key role in modern democracy and development, we put available manifestos in their place going into election 2020 of Ghana. It is important to note that the discussion is not to pitch one manifesto against the other in terms of superiority, but to look at how the promises address the desired level of development we require as a society. By so doing, we are able to highlight the gaps in these manifestos for a better society. And in this episode of cebsar Talk, we focus on power and energy. And let me introduce my guest who would help us deal with this important issue. Our first guest is Mr. Theophilus Kobner-Sappi. He is currently a doctoral researcher at the Technical University of Munich in Germany. He holds MSc in Physics, Applied and Engineering Physics from the Technical University of Munich, Germany, MSc in Photonics from the Friedrich Schiller University, Jena, Germany, and holds BSc in Engineering Physics from the University of Cape Coast, Ghana. His research focuses in energy conversion and storage. And I must say, it's a pleasure to host you. Welcome to cebsar Talk, Mr. Theophilus Kobner-Sappi.
Thank you, Mr. Ivan Sapiakisi. It's an honor and a privilege. And thank you, cebsar, for having me today.
Great. It's also a pleasure to host you. And our next guest is Engineer Maximilian Quartin. He's currently a Senior Technical Manager at the Strategic Security Systems. He's also Industrial Advisory Board member for the University of Energy and Natural Resources in Ghana. He's a Technical Committee member of the Ghana Standards Authority. He's a professional member of Ghana Institution of Engineers and a member of International Association of Engineering. He holds MBA in Green Energy and Sustainable Businesses from the Bologna Business School, University of Bologna in Italy. I must say it's a pleasure to host you. Welcome to cebsar Talk, Engineer Maximilian Quartin. Great. Let me welcome you once again, and please don't forget to mute your microphone when you are not speaking, but also when you're about to speak, don't forget to unmute the microphone for us. So let me welcome you once again to cebsar Talk, Mr. Quartin and Mr. Sappi.
Thank you, Mr. Host.
Thank you very much. And as usual, today also we are streaming live on Facebook at cebsar Africa, and also AK Mensa is sharing it on his wall together with others who would be doing so. And to our fellow cebsarians, we must say we are always pleased to have you, and we are happy that you join us to be able to move Ghana forward. I also have to issue a disclaimer here. Like we've been doing always, we would have Mr. Kwartin, who would focus on the MPP's manifesto, and then Theo would also focus on the NDC's manifesto. But they do not represent nor speak for these political parties. It's an intellectual discussion that we are having in order to be able to shape the promises that these parties have highlighted in their manifesto in order to move Ghana forward. We think that Ghana indeed deserves better, and we need to move Ghana into where it deserves after all these years of practicing democracy. So I'll start with you, Mr. Maximilian Kwartin. Please, can you kindly unmute your microphone?
Okay, so I think your volume is a little low. If you can please speak up, increase the volume, please.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me now? Is it okay?
Yeah, it's slightly better.
It's okay. Mr. Kwartin, is it okay now?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I don't know whether my other panelist is also facing the same challenge, but I think I'll manage anyway. I'll manage.
All right. All right. Thank you very much then. Yes. Anyway, so then let me welcome you to cebsar Talk, because I realized you probably did not hear me when I did the introduction of your welcoming. Hello, Mr. Kwartin.
I think it's really getting low.
Wow. But Theo, you are all right? You can hear me.
Yeah, absolutely. I can hear you.
Okay. This is strange. Anyway, so I think we would start anyway. I'm sure I'll try and speak a bit louder so that Mr. Kwartin, you can hear me.
Yes.
So like we said, today we are looking at the sector power and energy, and we want to see how the promises that have been made by the two political parties are able to transform our energy and power sector. And so I'll begin with you, Mr. Kwartin, and if you don't mind, if you can give us a summary of the structuring of the manifesto with regards to power and energy. Which major policies of power and energy do you feel that the MPP's manifesto, touches on or fails to consider? Just looking at the structure of the MPP's manifesto as far as power and energy is concerned.
Okay, so thank you very much. Let me first of all apologize for my current setting. I was actually out of Accra, but I think I'm touching base to my satellite office in about 10 minutes. So I think you have a different background in about 10 minutes, and also give you a stable video. Okay, so a good evening to my co-panelists and the other team and the audience, everybody who is listening or watching us this evening. Well, I have particular area that I look for in terms of power and energy. when you talk about power and energy, I think what every citizen is focusing on is actually looking at that the ordinary Ghanaian is not really looking at how you are generating power and all that. So my focus in looking at these manifestos and particularly on these two political parties, but I'm actually zooming in on the NPP, is what are they doing or what have they done to look at these two areas for when it comes to power and energy. I think they've had in on the part of their energy side, they've actually highlighted on things that they have done and things that they intend to do and continue to do, i.e., working on the tariff, the current electricity tariff, and also trying to highlight much more on availability. And we all know the difficulty we've had with power when it comes to availability and doom so the challenge has been that we've had erratic power supply and very expensive power supply over the previous years. I mean, that's of even the manifesto promises during 2016, before the electioneering year. And so I think they gain a lot of political points by hitting so hard on the erratic power supply in the country, and that is the doomsday, and also how expensive power was. So what they have turned around to focus on is to highlight what the achievement is and what they intend to continue with going forward with what the manifesto is actually looking at. So they capture issues on availability, they've captured issues on affordability, and they've captured issues on renewable energy, which is the order of the day now. They've actually highlighted what they intend to do to integrate renewable energy into our current energy mix, which is the focus of every country, especially with us that have, subscribed to the SDGs, So, in summary, this is what I would say, that the current, government and also the NPP have actually looked at these areas and highlighted much more on these areas in their prelude to their energy promises and also their power promises. They also have, outlook on the petroleum side, because the petroleum side, the oil and gas side, also have an impact on the power side. I think the discussions have been that we have what it takes. We have the installed capacity, but the running capacity has been the difficulty. So I think they've also highlighted on a lot of what they intend to do. That is trying to make um, um, make these fuel very competitive to be able to power the generator. If you look at the current energy mix, the thermal is actually taking about over 60% of the energy mix, and the other sources, hydro and renewables, are taking the rest of the 30 to 40%. So they've also highlighted on how competitive they want the oil and gas sector to also be, so that it will also help with the final energy outlook. A better energy outlook for the country. So this will be my initial remarks on what the NPP is doing with energy and power.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Engineer Quatin. So pretty much you say that when you look at the structure, they have, at least if you consider three important elements regarding affordability, availability, and renewable energy. These are areas that the manifesto has, looked at, and also issues with petroleum and the likes. But if you don't mind, if you could break it down, I mean, to the ordinary Ghanaian and to also some of us who are not in this field, when you say renewable energy, what exactly do you mean by that? And what areas or what type of renewable energy are they, or do they intend to focus on?
Okay, so thank you. So anyway, so renewable energy is basically energy that I mean, for want of a better word, that do not um waste away, or that is replenished anytime it is being used. So in Ghana, or for our part of the world, we so much focus on solar, because that is what is easily available. We don't really have the potential for wind. It's just a few spots that we're able to get the potential for wind. So the focus, as and this is captured in both the NPP and the NDC, the most viable resource when it comes to renewable is solar. And so they've had the focus on solar, trying to meet the SDG goals for solar, and also trying to increase distributed generation. When I talk about distributed generation is having individual generation sources to complement the overall national outlook. So, for example, institutions can have their own source of energy. Institutions like hospital, like schools, like the government facility, like homes, residential homes, and commercial facilities as well. So, this is where they're having the focus on when it comes to renewable energy.
All right, thank you very much. I'm sure when I come back to you again, I would ask questions around the relevance of, this renewable energy, and particularly whether the institutions that you talk about, whether these are things that could be achieved, whether the government is able to provide the enabling environment for the various organizations to be able to achieve this or not, and also the way forward as we intend to move Ghana forward. So I come to you, Theo. You are focusing on the NDC's manifesto, and for you also, when you look at the structure, what do you see? Which areas do you feel the manifesto touches, and which areas do you feel fails to touch?
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity once again. Thanks, cebsar, and regards to my co-panelists and to the cebsar people listening and watching this program today. So looking at the NDC manifesto, I mean, they catalog everything very beautifully. They put it down in a bullet form, so any reader can be able to actually get a glimpse of what they actually mean by everything they stated there. So they put in very nice pictures, and at least if you are not more or less literate, you can be able to relate to whatever they are actually trying to preach over there in their manifesto. So they catalog it in these subsectors. Because they are a social democratic party, normally they want social inclusion. So they put something they call social inclusion and indigenization as part of the thing they want to focus on when it comes to power generation. With this, they mean they want the individual, the entrepreneur in Ghana, the businessman, to be part and parcel of the power generation. So the power generation will not be only for people, for the, let's say, Valco, VRA, which is only generating, or for, let's say, B power plant, which is generating, or let's say Abuazi thermal plant. But they want IPP, which is independent power producers, to be part of this whole long chain of power production. as well as, let's say, bringing on board some public partnership also on board for the generation. This is because they see that the generation is not enough to meet what the agenda they have set up to do, because they want to generate around 5,000 megawatts of power for Ghana. But at the moment, we are generating only 3,000 megawatts. And the vision is that everybody, the SDG goals, everybody, I mean, Ghana should have 100% electrification throughout the country. But with this 3,000 megawatts, we are able to only catch about 60% of the population, which is woefully inadequate. So this is what they plan doing, that with this social inclusion and indigenization, they will be able to get so many people on board to help bring more generation into our grid. And with this, when they achieve this, they're able to also extend the electrification nationwide to other parts of the countries that do not have power. But they also would be able to do this because there are certain areas which more or less will be off-grid. And it's very difficult for the national grid to reach them. So they have another portion, or they have another subsection for this, which they will reach through this renewable energy technology that they also propose. By, let's say, if the sector or the village is more or less in the northern sector, which has enough potential for solar, which is using photovoltaic cells, they will be able to use photovoltaic cells at these areas, or let's say wind power. Actually, they also estimated that with wind power, we'll be able to generate about 1,000 megawatts of wind power. So with this, they've targeted 15 areas in the country where they can position these windmills, and through, let's say, the SDGs, they'll be able to actually meet it together in conjunction with solar cells, of course, and other renewable energies, which they also want to incorporate into this. Especially, they want to produce very cheap energy through something they called the biomass, or let's say using waste to produce electricity. And this you can get at a very cheap and affordable rate. So this is one of the things they also want to incorporate into their manifesto and actually realize it for Ghana. And they also have other areas, which is making sure that the energy is reliable and it's also affordable. Actually, this is what everybody wants, that at the end of the day, we have energy running every day, and not running only, but we can afford it regardless of, how much you actually want to use. And most importantly, they also want to industrialize. So if the power is always available, then we can actually have our industrialization dream realized. But if we have erratic power supply, then this dream cannot be realized in the end. They also go into the petroleum area, and we have this upstream and downstream petroleum. And the goal is to actually upscale our petroleum revenue. So they will actually help this toll to actually refine our oil in order to export some and use this oil in the country. And also they will empower the Atuamo gas processing factory, so that they'll process more of this gas. Then we can use some as LPG and other kind of stuff in the country, and also to power our thermal plants and other stuff. So in short, this is what the NDC manifesto seeks to do. And I think they capture every sector of the energy field.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sapi. So pretty much similar, even I would say a bit more comprehensive in comparison to that of the MPP. So if you look at the structure also, they also focus more on availability and of course affordability, and to some extent also the aspects of renewable energy comes in also in the NDC's manifesto. It's also very interesting that they also pretty much want to focus on wind, not only solar. When we get to feasibility, these are some of the questions we would interrogate to find out whether these promises are indeed feasible or not. So I would leave it at as it is now, and then quickly I'll come to you. Mr. Quarton. Yeah, great. So now let's look at some relevance of what you discussed earlier on as far as the structure is concerned. I know you brought in the element of, the structure being fit to address the SDG goals on power and energy. But the question I ask is that, do you feel that the promises in them are things that indeed, address the present problems of Ghana as a society?
Okay, so thank you. So you see that when you look at the expectations of the citizenry, the expectation of the citizenry is much more, as I initially indicated, is to look at what do we have on the table. If I'm going back to the house, do I have my lights on? If I'm going to the office, am I going to get light to be able to power my laptop, or maybe to get my air conditioning switch on and all that? These are some of the expectations of the citizenry. And with all this, will I be able to afford to pay in terms of affordability? Because the issue with ECG, for example, who is more like the on the distribution side, or the collection side, in terms of whatever the IPPs generate for us to use, is that the power that I'm giving to this let's say 25 million Ghanaians or 30 million Ghanaians, are they able to pay, and do they pay? Some of the challenges have been with theft of power. The theft of power uh, mostly has been as a result that people are not able to pay because power is very expensive, or power is expensive. And so, with expectation of the citizenry, it is true. Is the power available, and can I pay for it? So a lot of whatever has been captured in both manifestos all boils down to the fact that at the end of the day, can I pay for it, and do I have it? So a lot of these promises have been made and all that. Some you can quantify them, some you cannot quantify it. But what we all, at the end of the day, we are looking at is that are we having the power, and are we being able to pay? The focus on, let's say, SDGs, which brings in the issue of renewables, that is trying to generate clean power for the citizenry, most of the time secondary, because um, the ordinary Ghanaian is not really minded about getting a reduction in GHG emissions, that is greenhouse gas emissions. All he's interested in is to get this. And so the focus, to me, I feel the focus for these parties are to get the power in our homes and in our offices, and power that we can afford. I think we've, over the years, so much relied. Initially, we were relying on the hydro. And for the past, let's say, 10 to 15 years, we've been focusing on thermal generation, which of course is good because we have a base load energy demand, and we have a peak load energy demand. Um, we can find a way, for example, to make sure that during the day we can get cheaper sources of energy that we can still generate and still meet the demand. And when it comes to the peak demand levels, that is in the evenings, we are also able to generate in the same cheap way that people can always have and also be able to pay at the end of the day. So to me, um, the MPP, for example, um, talked or highlighted more about what they have done and what they intend to do in terms of the continuity, that is making power available and also making it very cheap. If you look at the trend, um, if you look at the trend from 2012 to 2016, I think when you look at the reports that PURC brought out in terms of the tariff for the various category of consumption levels, there was an overall increment of about 256% over the last 4 years. Sorry, between 2012 to 2016. Over the last 4 years, there has been more like a stable tariff regime, which even ends with a reduction of about 2% in terms of the tariffs that we pay both in the residential and in the commercial facility. This is what the ordinary Ghanaian is actually looking at. Most of the technicalities which is really involved in energy management is not really an issue for the ordinary Ghanaian. The ordinary Ghanaian wants to make sure that if I'm doing a business with ice kinky or with ice water, will I still be able to have that power to be able to freeze my ice water or my ice kinky? And will I also be able to pay for it? And so this is really what catches the attention of the ordinary Ghanaian. What happens with whatever energy mix and all that is really not the issue for the ordinary Ghanaian. And so I see much attention with the NPP on, because they highlight the fact that they've been able to stabilize the power, and they've been also able to levelize even the cost of the energy over the period, which in itself is what every Ghanaian, because um, when you wake up, I mean, tomorrow, and you hear that ECG has increased the tariff, people turn around to, I mean, make noise and also see if they can even really afford it. So what they have actually put, I mean, on the table is something that in somehow meets a significant, I mean, proportion of the citizens, and that is what really matters with the energy and the power side.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Martin. But maybe just a follow-up. So let me put it this way. Yes, I know the ordinary, or we all know that the ordinary Ghanaian is more interested in affordability and also, of course, availability than being bothered with clean energy or SDG 7 or whatever it is. But what do you, if you look at the MPP's promises on these, power and energy, do you feel that at least it had, because we also live in a global world, it's not like we live in isolation and we would want to do whatever. And as much as we want to satisfy the citizens, I think that as a country also we owe it as a duty to be able also to satisfy the SDGs to some extent. And do you feel that the promises in the MPP's manifesto, addresses that need of trying to achieve the SDG 7?
Yeah, so okay, so thank you. You see, with our part of the world, the SDG 7 primarily looks at I mean, have a lot of focus on clean energy. If you look at the performance of the other, I mean, the NDC and the NPP, both of them have increased the proportions of renewable energy. During the last regime, I think they were able to do about 20 megawatt installation of solar. This regime have also commissioned 20 megawatt of solar. And these are, these are solar units that are connected to the grid. There have been other several installations that are not connected to the grid, but are used in other homes and commercial and industrial, other C&I projects. So yes, they have a focus on that. I think the presidency is also doing almost a megawatt even at the Jubilee House. And that is also a good step in terms of rolling solar out, for example, to the other government agencies and even to government institutions like schools, other hospitals, and all that. I mean, it's a good one because I think the president is a co-chair to the SDGs, and that is a right step. So, with our part of the world, as I initially said, we are not really polluting the environment. GHG emissions to GHG emissions as compared to places like China and other developed countries that are really focusing on industrialization, we are not really emitting, a lot. And so with the commitment that is being done now, it is fine, except that I think over the years, when we set the renewable energy mix target to 10%, a lot hasn't been done. And to me, I feel it's even problematic because they only said that 10% of the national energy mix. I feel that if they had set like a defined threshold, like we want to do 300 megawatt solar installation, renewable energy installation and all that, that would have been achievable. But if we keep increasing the national energy demand and you tie a certain percentage threshold to your renewable energy mix, it is something that it will be very difficult for you to achieve because they initially set the 10% to 2020. Now, because both governments were not even able to achieve it, they've changed it to 2030. And I think, to me, I think it will still be very difficult for any of them to achieve. But in terms of investment into renewable energy, it is very low. It is very low. But I think both of them are trying their best to, as it were, do something to be able to look at the SDG goals.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Engineer Quatin. So basically, in terms of relevance, the NPP's manifesto, of course, satisfies the citizenry more, but to some extent also, as it has been said, there's been efforts, there's been commitments to also producing clean energy, because we are also focusing now on solar, thermal, and wind, as we probably would hear in the NDC's manifesto. Thank you very much, Mr. Quatin. So I come to you, Mr. Sape. Also, same question to you. In terms of relevance, do you feel that the wonderful promises that you highlighted in the NDC's manifesto, do you think that indeed they answer the critical issues in Ghana's power and energy situation? And how?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the NDC manifesto isn't any different from the NPP's. I think they are more or less at par. So you can see, I actually looked at the manifestos before, let's say the NDC's 2016, NPP's 2016 manifesto, and pitched it against, let's say, the National Energy Agenda or policy that was set up by, let's say, Professor Mills, as well as maybe this current government. And you can see that the points they highlight in these policies are what have been repeated in these manifestos. So for relevance, I think, the NDC's manifesto is also really relevant to the ordinary Ghanaian. This is because they also talk about affordability, which is key for every Ghanaian, because every Ghanaian wants to be able to afford the electricity that they use. And of course, they don't talk so much about, let's say, the erratic power supply, but they also give assurance that they are going to increase generation by bringing on board some other energy, which is really good for us, like renewable energies, as I spoke about earlier. So they talk about, let's say, assurance that there will be generation for you so that your power would not be cut off every day. And they also talk about, yeah, you can afford the power, so there is no problem. And they even go ahead to talk about some taxes that they are going to review the tax regime to reduce the taxes so that it wouldn't have so much effect on the Ghanaian. They also in petroleum and in the gas, they also talk about reviewing the price of gas down and the price of petrol down to benefit the fisher folks who even use the premise and all those kind of things. They also talk about, let's say, the cost of diesel and all those things for the people in the transportation industry, so that they wouldn't also be run at a loss when they buy this petrol and all those kind of things. So it is really people-centered, as the manifesto talks about. It's the People's Manifesto. So you can see that they also wrote something about social inclusion and indigenization. So they want the Ghanaian to own the power, to make sure that the power doesn't really have a toll on their, let's say, their finances, but it will be affordable for all of them. And of course, they also go ahead and talk about other things, which is also really beneficial for Ghanaians, like the national electrification. So other parts of the country that does not have this electricity will have access to electricity. And if it's not connected to the grid, they will make sure that they go off grid by incorporating the renewable energy technologies like biomass, wind, solar, etc. So it is really people-centered. Again, they also talk about something like the street light. They want to put light on all the streets, which is really key for all Ghanaians, because there are so much theft these days. Even in broad daylight, people are stealing, armed robbery here and there. So security is also key for Ghanaians, and they want to provide that also in this manifesto. So I would say it's really relevant to each and every Ghanaian.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sape. So pretty much similar to the MPP's manifesto, as you rightly put it. It's relevant because they indeed touch on areas that would benefit the citizenry at large. But maybe just a quick one on their indigenization and social inclusion. I mean, are we there yet? And how do you, I know we'll come to feasibility, so probably this would have been good for feasibility, but I still want to ask it now. Because in the first round, when you talked about the structuring, you mentioned that they want to do the IPP, that is the independent power producers, something like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do that? Do they intend to resource individuals or?
Yeah, in a way, they want to, let's say, take for instance, solar cells. There are individuals who can actually own solar cells. They can purchase it and use it, let's say, on top of their buildings, on their roof. So they will encourage these individuals who can actually purchase them so that they will be off the national grid. And of course, when you have this solar cells, you also are short of a constant tariff. So your electricity wouldn't go up or down, it will be more or less stable. So this is what they intend doing. And also for companies, small companies or big companies that can also afford this, they also empower them and help them. And let's say if you're also a small company or an individual businessman, entrepreneur, and you want to also actually own this, they will support you more or less like with a loan or something like that. So you can also purchase something like this and be on your own more or less. So the national grid isn't really under so much pressure. Of course, there will be other individuals who will be much more wealthy and they can actually own more than this solar cells, more of the solar cells, so that they can power maybe a whole community, etc., etc. So I think we are there, and it can be done.
Great, thank you very much, Mr. Sapi. So this is indeed indigenization and social inclusion. We'll wait to see how it turns out. But before we continue, just a quick comment or question from some cebsarians, people who are watching us live. And one from Abraham Yele, he says, thanks for taking time to explain the thematic areas of two major political parties. This more clear than the various political communicators. And then another one from Michael Edujemfi, he says, relative to generation and its methods, couldn't we also focus more on the generational tools which limit global warming? I guess this is a question, and I don't know, maybe Mr. Engineer Kwartin would go first. So he's asking that relative to generation and its methods, couldn't we also focus more on the generational tools which limit global warming? What's your take on that?
Okay, so thank you. Well, when you talk about global warming, I think we still come back to the issue of trying to get sources that, at the end of the day, will reduce CO2 emissions. And so the need for renewable energy, and as I keep saying, with that part of the world, um, the most viable of the renewable energy is solar, because we have very good radiation levels in Ghana. I keep saying that Germany, for example, only has about half of the radiation levels that we have in Ghana, but Germany has made investment to over 44,000 megawatt installation on solar alone, and that is very significant. At the moment, if you actually aggregate even the grid connected solar units and the other CNI, that is commercial and industrial installations, you are actually not looking at even 1,000. But Germany, that do not even have the radiations, have done about 44,000 megawatt installation. This is why the government needs to look at generational, sources like solar. And I think we both of us have been talking about solar. And when it comes to solar, the challenge has been that, one, there has been a lot of investment by the government in other generational sources, specifically with thermal. And thermal is not clean. Thermal is the most contributing factor to this global warming, because it has a lot of this CO2 emissions, or the GHG emissions. And so the challenge has been that government really have to support that industry, the renewable energy industry that is looking at solar. The challenge with solar has been that the initial investment drives people away, and people do not even want to do the investment. And government is not both governments, right, haven't really done a lot to, as it were, help with the promotion of solar, I mean, in our homes and offices. So it is time government needs to, if it's a subsidy, it is welcomed, because previously the government was subsidizing a lot of these other generations that were not clean and that were contributing to the global warming. And it is time government needs, if government really wants to, have a better focus on the SDG goals, or try to help reduce this global warming effects. Government needs to have, financial support for the renewable energy industry. Especially the solar, so that people, it will not be that a burden for people to see that going into solar is too expensive, because that has been the cliche. And people are just shying away. And even for IPPs, as my other colleague mentioned, the government needs to support the IPPs. And I'm talking about IPPs that are actually into large scale power generation, 50 megawatt, 100 megawatt, and the megawatts. Because a lot of the challenge with these IPPs have been that they need securities, they need other government assurances, they need guarantees. And these are some of the things that government. And if I talk about government, I'm referring to both governments, because over the years, both governments haven't really helped with these IPPs. They are projects that are really still lying on the drawing table, and it hasn't really seen the light of the day. And if you go, the technology is not a problem. Deploying the technology is not a problem. The problem has been with the financing and other financial securities that these IPPs need. Because at the end of the day, these IPPs are also bringing out a very competitive tariff. The levelized cost of energy, when you look at some of these investments, are very competitive than even some of these thermal that have been invested in over the years. And if you look at records for other installations in other countries, even within our own sub-region, that have had support from the World Bank in terms of financing, in terms of detailed feasibility studies, the tariff for some of these projects are very, very low. Some are even so low that you can even compare to hydro generation. So to me, I feel that if the government wants to help reduce this global warming effect, and also try to, reach high on the SDG goals, government really have to have a focus on supporting the solar industry or the renewable energy industry.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Engineer Quarton. So I will come back to you briefly to ask some follow-up questions on the solar energy, but I just wanted to hear from you, Mr. Sape, if you also had some take on the question that was posed by a follower on Facebook. Okay. All right. So, Mr. Quarton, let me ask my follow-up question. I mean, actually, I wanted to ask what is stopping us from going into solar, and you've highlighted on one major limitation, that is the cost. That is the cost, and you also brilliantly put that if government is willing to support the independent power producers, I mean, those who are able to produce solar in the watts, in the megawatts, then I guess they could also support other individuals within their vicinity. But beyond the cost, don't we have any other challenges? Because sometimes it's still difficult to understand why we are not able to invest into this solar, energy, given that it's also a very clean energy. And if we want to contribute to the SDG 7, then this, of course, is the way forward. Beyond the cost, are there any other hindrances to we being able to realize this? Because you gave Germany as an example, and it's amazing what they've been able to do as a country, even given the where they find themselves. Beyond the cost, what are other challenges as well?
Okay, so I think apart from the cost, right? And if I'm talking about cost, I'm actually looking at key financial support for these IPPs and other companies that really wants to come in and invest. One other challenge with the deployment of solar has been that I think the 2011 Renewable Energy Act talks about reverse metering or net metering. And this is a key incentive even for places like Germany, why people want to even invest in solar, because the net metering basically works on the principle that um, if you have an installed capacity of solar on your roof, and your solar is actually generating, let's say, 5 units of energy, and because solar do not work in the evening or when there is no sunlight, you still turn around to still consume from the grid. And so if, let's say, your total consumption from the grid in a month is also, let's say, 10 units, the solar, whatever you've generated from the solar, in effect goes to net off the consumption you have taken from the grid. So at the end of the day, instead of you paying for the price of 10 units, you turn around to pay the price of 5 units, because the other 5 units from the solar have been net off from whatever you consume from the grid. So ECG, for example, who is the distributor, is supposed to um, recognize the amount you are generating, and that is excess to the grid. And so ECG have to welcome that 5 units and net off that 5 units from your consumption from the grid. But the reverse, that is the net metering, has not taken effect. I think in 2015 it was piloted, and in 2016 it was, I think it was stopped. The ECG actually put a hold on that, and that has been one of the demotivating factors why people do not even want to invest, because at the end of the day, whatever excess generation that is pushed to the grid, ECG do not recognize it. And that would have been more like a weight of whoever has installed solar. So that is not even a motivation. So ECG and or maybe government have to, in a way, find a way, or really have to implement that net metering policy, such that people, it becomes very attractive for people to invest in solar. Because even though nobody is getting monetary credit in terms of whatever he's selling to the grid or she's pushing to the grid, if it's actually taking off the final bill from the person, it is a good motivation for anybody at all to invest in the solar. So this is one of the key challenges. The net metering policy needs to be implemented, and implemented in whole. I think the challenge has been that initially ECG was recognizing it as a one-to-one unit offset, but they wanted to also make some profit from it. And so even if each unit of energy that is sold to the grid is even recognized at 0.5, it is better than zero, because at the end of the day, the person knows that whatever energy I'm selling back to the grid, ECG recognizes that energy as 50%. That in itself is better. They say half bread is better than none. So that is one of the challenge, and I think government needs to work on that.
Thank you very much, Engineer Kwartin. So you said net metering, right? That's one of the things that the government could have a look at, where at least people who generate this solar energy could at least be given some form of incentives, I guess, to be able to use their energy anytime they are off the grid. Thank you very much. So if you are joining us live on Facebook, this is cebsar Talk. And today we are, as usual, continuing with our series of interrogating the manifestos. Today we focus on power and energy. And our guest have been Engineer Maximilian Kwartin. He's focusing on the MPP's manifesto, and Mr. Theophilus Sape. He's also focusing on the NDC's manifesto. But again, it's important to note that they do not represent nor speak for these political parties. We are having an intellectual discussion in order to be able to move Ghana forward. Ghana indeed deserves a better society. And that is what we do here on cebsar Talk. Great. So I come back to you, Engineer, again. And as we move into the second round, we've seen that the two major political parties indeed have wonderful promises. We know there are, of course, challenges to deal with them. And that's exactly what we're about to do in this final round, where we look at feasibility and perhaps the supposed impact of these promises that they have. So I know we've touched on it slightly, but when you look at the three areas, I mean, I will put you on the three areas that you discussed, which is the availability, the affordability, and also the renewable energy. But particularly the point that you mentioned, that they intend to help or support institutions to be able to generate their own source of energy. Do you feel that these things are feasible, particularly the last one that I talked about? Is this something that as a nation we are able to support institutions to generate their own source of energy, or like we always say, it's business as usual? I mean, it's just a rhetoric, it's a political talk. And how do you assess the feasibility of the affordability and also the availability aspects?
Okay, so if I got you correctly, you are actually looking at how feasible government is going to support, let's say, individuals to, as it were, generate their own energy. And also, the second question was,
It's pretty much the same. So also, how feasible do you think that the affordability bit? Do you think it's just business as usual? It's just a rhetoric? It's just political talk? Or these are things that we can achieve? The affordability bit, which is also, of course, the critical issue for majority of Ghanaians. They want to be able to have power every day, and they also want to be able to afford. They want cheap, I would say, source of affordable and available power. So that's the question I'm asking. Do you find them to be feasible?
no, so yeah, it's feasible, I mean, in all scenarios. Let's look at the government supporting individuals too. At the end of the day, the government is actually indirectly doing a lot of subsidies. Even with the deregulated market that both the petroleum side and the non-petroleum side are even, I mean, witnessing now. Government is still doing a lot of subsidies. Government is actually doing a lot of negotiations. Government is actually putting in a lot of guarantees for, and all these are forms of subsidies. It might not be named a subsidy, but all these are externality costs that the government is still doing. If the government turns around to actually support individual persons doing their own installation, it is in effect going to help the government itself. The reason is that we are looking at industrialization, and industrialization always goes with energy, right? Energy is always a factor of achieving your industrialization goals. And so, if at the end of the day, a chunk of whatever is generated into the national grid is being pushed to these factories that are really coming up, the 1D, 1Fs, and all that are coming up, they are really going to get the actual, tariff that these IPPs are actually looking at selling to Gridco, for Gridco to transfer to ECG, for ECG to send to the end consumer. That is even within the C&I space, right? And so the other tariffs that in some ways are being reduced for residential consumers will rather be pushed to these factories who will have what it takes to be able to pay for the government to see its revenue targets in terms of the energy side. And of course, a lot of these thefts that are happening within the residential spaces. And so if the person himself, if the government gives the individual support for them to build their own akosombo within their houses, within their homes and all that, at the end of the day, the person is responsible for making sure that the akosombo works and works very well within his or her own home. And so whatever is being generated, whatever contracted demand and IPP signs with the government in form of a PPA to generate and sell to the power, the government will be able to, as it were, collect the necessary revenue. Recently, the ECG was complaining that people are not even paying after the the relief the government gave to homes and everybody after during the COVID period, people feel that we are still having the relief and that people are not even paying. And so if people are doing their own individual distributed generations, they are rather going to have a focus on that to be able to maintain so that they get that constant power and reinvest in if there's a faulty part and all that. So that is doable and that is feasible. And at the end of the day, that burden in subsidizing hugely for the whole nation wouldn't still come back on the government, which is also a cost to the government. Talking about affordability, it is when you look at these generation sources, as I mentioned initially, solar is really getting cheaper. Initially, when you talk about solar, nobody wants to get close to solar, for example. But now solar is really getting cheaper. And so government will be able to make power affordable for the citizens if government gives the necessary, let's say, support and assistance for people that are coming in to invest in solar. We are just looking at the immediate term. Let's look at the long term, the medium to long term. The medium to long term is that if a lot of investment is made in solar, for example, it will even become cheaper. I mean, basic principle of economies of scale will let you know that if there is high demand and people are really, I mean, coming in, people are really investing in that, the price will, of course, I mean, come down because at the end of the day, there are a lot of people, for example, producing solar panel in Ghana. There are a lot of people even producing inverters and batteries in Ghana. And so if you are hiking your prices, for example, somebody somewhere just wants to make, let's say, the 1% margin on his investment and will, of course, I mean, bring the price down, just like the deregulated market of the fuel that we are having now. People are not able to hike fuel prices because if you go to this fuel station and it's $1, somebody is selling it for 90 cents. And so why don't I go to the 90 cents per? Somebody else is doing it for 80 cents. And so that is also affordable. So the long-term effect, now it will be a difficult thing for the government to look at. But in the long term, is really going to have an impact. And the reason why, for example, we had a lot of this, I think we are familiar with this take or pay and take and pay, is that we were really hungry for power. And so the take or pay and the take and pay was what people were using to, as it were, leverage on investment. So somebody comes, okay, you know what, you want the power. I'm going to give you 100 megawatts of power, but this is the condition to it. Whether if I bring the generators, whether you take the power from me or you don't take the power from me, you are still going to pay the charge. And that is what really escalated the tariff, and people were not even able to even afford the electricity that was being generated. But if, for example, the government had invested, for example, in a lot of these distributed generations and all that, and power was easily reachable by homes, by offices, by commercial facilities, and by industrial facilities, nobody can just come in to give you his terms or her terms that, you know what, you need power, you are in need, is a key security increment for your country. And so I'm bringing you 100 megawatts. Whether you take power or you don't take power, you are still going to pay me. And the government will be taken as a ransom. So if government just look at the initial investment into some of these projects, for example, and is able to help those that are really coming up, at the end of the day, a lot of people are going to see the need to go in for solar because solar will become so cheap, for example, that if you are selling it for $1, I'm selling it for 80 or 70 cents. And I mean, the demand itself the national demand itself will reduce because people have already invested in their own individual demands. And that will really let us see the affordability of energy that we are all struggling with now.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Engineer Quatten. So pretty much it sounds very good and promising, I would say. if you listen to him as he justifies that the promises are indeed doable, they are achievable. These are not things that are rocket science, and particularly he he stresses more on the issue of supporting individuals, the independent power producers, the IPPs, so that people could help support the national grid. And I think this could indeed help to promote both the affordability and also enhance availability if government is able to look at that particular area of supporting IPPs to be able to generate their own power. So I come to you, Mr. Sapi, and when you also talked about the structure of the NDC's manifesto, there were some highlights that I noted. It's pretty much the same as the MPP's manifesto. What do you also think? What's your take? Do you feel that it's feasible? Particularly, again, you could also have a bite on the IPP aspect where the NDC seems even to be stronger on that point, that where they talk about the indigenization and social inclusion. Do you find it to be feasible from their point of view? And also when they talk about the renewable energy, they highlighted that they would want to focus on both wind and solar. What's your take on that? Is it feasible, particularly with the wind aspect?
Yeah, thank you very much. And sorry for the short break because I had some internet disruptions.
That's fine.
Yeah. In all, I think it's feasible. Let me start with the renewable energy with wind and solar. Actually, they also go a step further to add biomass because they also think biomass will be a very cheap way of actually producing energy. But of course, this is not in a large scale. Biomass would be in a very small scale for, let's say, farmers, because normally you're going to use the waste from agriculture. Let's say you plant something and the organic waste, or maybe the waste from cows or pigs. I mean, when you rear cattle and you get this their feces, so to speak, you can use it to actually power your small farmland or small village within the farm or something like that. So actually, it is feasible. And also, let's say if you gather a lot of waste, because households makes a lot of waste, we produce a lot of waste in our kitchen. Also, industries produce a lot of waste in the kitchen and in their industries and all those things. So when you are able to gather this waste and you can actually process them very well, then you can produce electricity at a very cheap rate. But the problem here is that it is very costly to actually gather this waste, because in Ghana, our wastes are not separated. We add everything together. So actually trying to segregate this waste is also really cost intensive. So what they intend to do is to actually maybe bring this practice of this segregation of waste, which is normally practiced here in Germany. And when this is done, then the collection of this waste would be really cost intensive, because it wouldn't take this waste at a very high cost. Then we can produce waste energy from biomass, which is going to be really helpful for the country. And when you go to wind, for instance, there have been many studies. Actually, what I came across was that I saw studies which show that in Ghana we have 15 sites, which also along the coast, because that's where the wind is. I mean, the intensity of the wind is very high. So over there, when you place this windmills, you are able to tentatively you are able to produce about 10,000 megawatts of energy, which is 1/3 of what we even have now. So if you are able to do wind, then it's going to be really, really good. So it's feasible in a way. But of course, the cost of producing wind energy is also really very high, because to buy this permanent magnet in this wind turbines, that helps it to rotate at a very, let's say, controlled speed, is very, very costly. So that is the thing that is actually hindering the production of wind energy. And also, let's say for solar cells, as my co-panelist said, it's also cost intensive. It's always the cost. It's always about the cost. So if they're able to actually make it a bit competitive, then you can beat down the cost, and it will be actually feasible to actually get this energy. But of course, for this wind and solar energy, it also depends on the international market, because it doesn't. We don't produce them in Ghana. It's abroad. So what I saw in their manifesto was to actually get some people, some scientists, some engineers who have Ghanaian background to actually come on board and help them to probably have maybe an engagement with the international market to actually beat down the cost of producing the solar cells, and they can be able to get more of the solar cells to actually power our energy sector. So, I think it all boils down to cost. And yeah, if they're able to get the money and actually attract investors, then it is possible. So the thing is, we have to make sure that our market has this driven support base. So if it has this driven support base, then I think everything in the manifesto is doable. Yeah.
Mm.
I think you asked another question. I forgot the very first one.
It was with the IPPs. I realized that I even asked that earlier on, but sure, you can go ahead and say something about it. Your colleague has already or extensively dealt with it, but feel free.
Okay, then I think it's fine, because I think with the IPPs, I already spoke something about it.
Yeah.
I think if government has this commitment, then definitely they will be able to help individuals and small companies to actually own some of these power plants. And it will be a plus to the country, because they will be off the national grid. And this is what we need, so that our generation capacity will be increased, and the generation versus consumption rates would be at the international rates that we need.
Thank you very much.
Can I please take a bite on what my colleague just said?
All right, go ahead, please.
Okay, so I think growing up we were told that brighten the corner where you are, and to me, I feel that you see, when you look at the current national outlook on energy generation and consumption, when you look at the latest report by the Energy Commission and all that, clearly, whatever we are even, the installed capacity is way beyond even the national peak demand. There are a lot of installed capacities. If you look at recent reports, the government has really renegotiated a lot of even the PPAs that were signed, and some of them have even cancelled them and all that. I think that is even what is captured in the NPP manifesto. They've renegotiated about 8, cancelled about 3, and all that, and all these were with the reason that a lot of them were with a take or pay PPA agreement, which was really causing a lot of bleeding to the country. I think the government was paying about $1 billion every year, $1 billion for energy that was not being used. So we need to tailor a lot of this investment that is into this power generation. We need to tailor it to our current need and the projection in terms of the increment in energy needs. I think Ghana has an annual increment of about 10% in terms of energy. But to looking at, with the submission that my colleague just said, I feel that we should, wind is good, very clean, and it's not as competitive as solar in terms of the levelized cost of energy. That is how much a unit of energy may cost from generating it from wind. But we have key challenges with the country. So to me, I feel that the focus on renewable energy should rather be on, we should rather have a focus on the low-hanging fruits. What do I mean by the low-hanging fruit? The low-hanging fruits are what we have, the technology we have now, and how easily we can deploy that technology. And with our part of the world, and in Ghana, for example, a wind turbine, for example, a 1 megawatt wind turbine can be longer than even a trailer truck, just a blade of it. So and even moving these equipments even to the site where you are going to do the installation and even have the generation and all that. These are very difficult, and all these are part of the, let's say, to be part of the project cost, which will be captured in a financial model to run to get an end tariff for we to even buy and all that. So it is good in the long term. I mean, such investment have to be done, but our road network, for example, is very bad. When it comes to O&M, in terms of operation and maintenance to some of these facilities, the difficulty is that if you need to even replace a blade of a wind turbine and all that, the costs involved and all that wouldn't make the end tariff that competitive to the ordinary Ghanaian. And as I initially said, the focus of the ordinary Ghanaian is pretty much on availability and also how much even that is even costing me, right? So to me, I feel that now, I mean, we've moved from an era that we had even serious challenges with availability of energy, that is during the last regime. And so if you really have to even do something to support availability and also affordability, I think we need to look at the low-hanging fruits, those that we wouldn't really spend a lot of energy to grab. That should be the immediate term to the medium term. In the long term, when all our roads are fine, when I mean all these networks, our mode of transportation is making some of these things easier, we can be looking at investing in this. In any case, when you look at these two, I mean, potentials, we have huge potential for solar. Of course, there are spotted points, just like my colleague said, that you can capture the wind. But let's also look at the cost involved in developing such technology. Because at the end of the day, you want to do something that will make the power not just available, but something that people would not just steal because they can't even afford it.
Thank you very much, Engineer Kwartin. I was actually going to ask you your take on that, because at the very beginning, you seem to vote for solar other than wind. But I don't know, Mr. Sape, if you also have any more comments to add to it. But for the two of you, I mean, between these two, should I say, sources of renewable energy, from the perspective of the Ghanaian, I mean, if you look at Ghana as a country, which of these two do you feel is less expensive? I mean, just a straightforward question. But if you have any rebuttals to that, what's also your take on his submission, you know, comparing the wind and the solar sources?
Yeah, it's a very valid argument he raised over there, and I think I buy into it that wind is a bit expensive than solar. I mean, considering, let's say, the transportation system. But of course, I mean, here in Germany, I think when I look through the statistics, I see wind a bit lower than solar in Germany. So you can see that we have more wind turbines than, let's say, I mean, the wind generates more capacity than solar. Yeah, that's why always, I mean, you can use the wind throughout the seasons, winter, summer. So it's really feasible here in Germany than the solar, because solar, you just have to store it at some point and later on release it as energy. And it's normally used in the summer. In Ghana, as he raised the point, our transportation system is a bit not so good to transport this very long poles of wind turbine. But maybe if we also do this rail network very well, we can use railway to the trains to transport this wind. But in the long term, I think all boils down to competition. If there is real competition in the wind sector globally, I think that the prices will really come down, and it will be even more feasible to do wind energy in Ghana than solar, even though we have the capacity to do solar because of our radiation levels.
Yeah, thank you very much. Very interesting perspectives out there. And I'm afraid that we would have to end soon, but I must say that I've really enjoyed the discussion, and I'm sure that fellow Cebsarians have also enjoyed it, and it's been very educative and informative. So let me come to you, and then I will start with you again, Engineer Kwartin, on your concluding remark. I mean, I'm sure you might even repeat some of the things that you've highlighted on here, but moving forward, I mean, regardless of whether it's the MPP that wins power or the NDC that wins power, what would be your suggestions, you know, to improve the power and energy situation that we have in Ghana, especially when both of you say the promises are indeed feasible, they are doable, they are things that we can indeed achieve as a country. What are some of the suggestions that you would like to give in order to help the next government to, you know, help transform our energy and power sector so that they would not only just be available, but they would be affordable, and also we would have clean energy? I start with you, Engineer Kwartin.
All right, thank you, Ivan. So I think, you see, with what I will just conclude on is that I actually combed through the NDC manifesto, and what I realized was that it was very silent on affordability in terms of tariff. The points that they actually captured in on the part of energy was much. It, it was more like it was it was somehow summarized, right? And to me, one of the key challenges with the NDC government during their last tenure was that the tariffs were very expensive, and it kept rising each year. If you look at, as I initially said, I mean, they had a total escalation within that period of about 200 and over 256% in terms of the growth. The compounded growth was about 256%, which was one of the reasons that I mean, the Ghanaians felt that they were bleeding on the part of electricity tariff. I think they need to. What I realized was that they were very silent on that, and I felt that coming back or giving out another manifesto, they would have do more to convince Ghanaians on the part of how they should be rest assured in terms of the tariff, and especially also in terms of the availability, because I think Doomsaw was a kill for them, and it really affected their government and their performance. What I also realized in the in on I mean in their manifesto on the part of energy was on thermal, and I think thermal, we've had enough of the thermal, which at the end of the day do not make the prices of energy or the prices of electricity any cheaper. So I think we should pull some brakes on the part of the thermal generation, and rather have a way how we can really invest on the part of cheap renewable sources that are also very clean. Um, the NPP manifesto um, highlighted what they have done in terms of stabilizing even the tariff. They have a compounded annual reduction of 2% from when they took over from 2017 till now. But even as at now, the tariff is still averaging around 15 to 16 cents.
Yeah.
even with all that they were able to do in terms of trying to stabilize the tariff. And of course, they went ahead in some ways to even reduce some of the tariff, which in their manifesto they capture it as very historic. That in itself is true because no government has really reduced electricity tariffs. I think there's more that they can do in terms of working on the end tariffs that the ordinary Ghanaian is actually looking at, because that is what I mean makes the ordinary Ghanaian goes back to his or her pocket, as it were, to pay for the energy that is available and that he's using. So I expect that both parties focus on renewable energy. And one observation that I also made was that both manifestos did not have or was very silent on the net metering policy, which is a key incentive for those that are really interested to invest in renewables, especially solar, which of course will also help the national outlook in terms of the SDG goals. So to me, I think this also have to be the focus, because the law was passed in 2011 and there hasn't been any implementation, and that is not a good outlook for the citizens.
All
So
right.
that would be my final take.
All right. Thank you very much. We've run out of time. If not, I wanted to ask you what would be your suggestions also to the ordinary Ghanaians who consume this,
So that I'll just say a word. I mean, what the ordinary Ghanaian is also supposed to do is that I think when we went into the Dumso era, I personally, for example, was doing a lot of advocacy in terms of energy conservation and energy efficiency. I think we also have to be very minded to conserve energy, because if we are also able to conserve energy, at the end of the day, we wouldn't use a lot of energy or waste a lot of energy that, we are just, paying a lot more to even generate to start with.
Yeah.
So I think what I would say is that we should also be minded about energy efficiency and energy conservation. If you are not using the appliances, just switch it off. If you are not using the bulbs, just switch it off. And if you are buying any appliance, we need to make sure that that appliance is not just consuming so much power, because now there is a lot of technology that is really reducing high wattage appliances, that is reducing a lot of wattages that the appliances are using. So that would be my message to the ordinary citizen.
All right, thank you very much. And I absolutely agree. It's one of the areas that we need to pay attention to, advocacy on energy use efficiency and also conservation. So, Mr. Sapi, what's your concluding remark? What would be your suggestions to the next government in order to help achieve availability, affordability, and also clean energy?
Yeah, thank you once again. I think I will add a little to what Engineer Quatten said about the conservation of energy. I think I saw in one of the manifestos, I don't remember which one, that they are also doing something called trying to distribute this LED bulbs, which is of course energy efficient. So I think the citizens can actually also buy into this energy efficient bulbs and for their houses, so that they can actually conserve some energy to help all of us. To talk about my concluding remarks, I would say that, yeah, we all want Ghana to be industrialized. This is the goal of the country and of we the citizens of Ghana. So in order to industrialize, we need more energy. We need to produce more energy. And one of the ways to realize this and to get clean energy is through renewable energy. So I would urge the country and the government to go in this direction to get more renewable energy into the national grid than to rely solely on thermal, which is now one of the, I think it's the one which is consuming, we are spending much money on now, because I think it controls about 60% of the national grid. So we should just move away from thermal, which also isn't clean energy. And of course, petrol, the prices of petrol continues to increase in the world. So we should just shift from thermal to more renewable, even hydro. Although it's not all that sustainable, we can just also do more hydro plus, let's say, solar, wind if it's possible. We also add some biomass and try to explore other, let's say, avenues. Of course, most of the manifestos were silent on nuclear energy. We have had this Ghana Atomic Energy Commission in Ghana, GAEC, for like, I mean, since independence, like 60 years and above. But I mean, there haven't been any mention of Ghana trying to, I mean, tap into this nuclear thing. Because when you go, I mean, nuclear is, though it's, let's say, uh, let's say there are so many things around nuclear, let's say producing nuclear bomb and all those things, those negative stuffs. But nuclear is more or less the best kind of energy, if you ask me, because when you look at the volumetric and the gravimetric analysis of, let's say, this is how we rate energy. You see that solar, let's say nuclear power is always at the top. When you talk about the volumetric, it tops. When it comes to volumetric too, it tops it. So nuclear can be a way to also go. Let's tap into this GAEC and let them do something. If we can even get, let's say a little over 10 megawatts from nuclear to add to the national grid, I think it would also be very good because it's also clean energy. Um, and with this industrialization goal, if we're able to drive this, then we can also create more jobs because the industries will be running and more people will get jobs to do. And at the end of the day, there will be equitable distribution of wealth for all Ghanaians. And in the end of the day, at the end of the day, this is what we want to do. We want to achieve some macroeconomic stability for the country. So with this, with all these things on board, we are able to get there and reach our goal. And I think all governments can take this on board and help achieve that for Ghana. And thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sapi. That was very comprehensive there. And so from my side also, I think it's pretty much clear. We hope and expect that the next government would be able to provide power and energy that is affordable, available, and also clean. And one major way to do that, as we have heard from our guest today, would be to focus on renewable energy, particularly solar, but also in combination with wind, which is also feasible in our part of the world. We should be able to support independent power producers. And by so doing, I think we would be able to reduce the stress on the national grid. And as Engineer Kwartin said, we should also look at the net metering. It's something that we have to pay attention to. And also from Mr. Sapi, maybe we should also have a look at nuclear energy, which is also clean energy. Thank you very much, our fellow cebsarians who followed us today. And I must say that I've really enjoyed the show. Thank you very much, Engineer Kwartin. Thank you very much, Mr. Sapi. And let me end with this last read from a Facebook fan, from Love Christ, Nana Ifiatra. She says, great show by all standards, hashtag better society for all. My name is Evans Apia Kisi, the host of cebsar Talk. See you next week as we interrogate the manifestos, focusing on another sector. Bye-bye.